I am so excited every time I get a chance to be in your presence, every time I get a chance to talk to you, to give you the chance to empower us with the career that you've had and the life that you have had and that you continue to do, which is amazing to all of us. The Wrecking Crew, there are so many stories and so many, legendary things that you have done in your life that it's almost hard to capture. We need a documentary to capture it in the process.
Hard to believe.
It really is amazing. We met many years ago.
It's one of my favorite stories.
Tell me that story.
I'm sitting there, Steve Gadd is sitting over here with his wife and all these people. I'm sure Jules was there. I forget, just a load of people.
Yeah.
And it was a dining room or a little breakfast, whatever it was, at the Hilton. I think it was the Hilton, Austin, Texas. Anyway, we're sitting there talking, having conversation. All of a sudden, this big boom radio voice comes on and says, and comes up to me and says, and I didn't know the man. I'd never met the man. And it says something like, this is the guy that took all the music that we all wanted to record, and he got the first shot at it. And look at him now. He's a big shot. Something like that. Hysterical. And of course, I knew he was joking, but I had never met this man. Now I met him.
Well, I say it because I always say, you took all the great songs. The amount of recordings that you did, all the great songs. And I always said, when I was younger and getting involved with music, I had like 10 songs that I had my favorite drummers on that I would just live for. Then I found out that you were 9 of the 10 that I liked. The amount of recordings you did, let's go back to the beginning as far as how music entered your life.
I was born in Holyoke, Massachusetts. And when my dad was a shoemaker, and when we were about 7 or 8 years old, we moved to Hartford, Connecticut. He had gotten a job with the Connecticut Leather Company. It happened to be, the leather company happened to be right across the street from the State Theater in Hartford, Connecticut. Now, I was a kid growing up. I was then maybe 7, 8 years old. By the time I was 9 or 10, getting interested in music, and we were very, very poor. And I remember my father would give me the dime, take me to work on Saturday morning, and I would go over to the State Theater, be the first kid in line, pay my 10 cents, go down front and center, and by the time the first show came on, it was like an 8 a.m. show, and they would have a stage show, they would have a previews, a couple of cartoons, and a movie. And they would do that 5, 6, 7 times a day.
Oh my gosh.
And I would sit there through all of it. I can still smell the powder coming off of the people. And when the band hit the theme song, and I knew, I just automatically, I guess it was just musical talent, I recognized almost immediately whose band it was. And of course you saw advertisements of who's going to be playing there, whatever. And I could, and I think a lot of drummers go through this when they're watching a show. Because I got to where I knew every arrangement backwards, singing-wise.
Yeah.
I couldn't read music or anything.
Yeah.
But I knew I wanted to be a drummer. And I know every drummer has done this. You're watching the show, and you're watching Buddy Rich, for example. Or you're watching all these great drummers, all colors.
Yeah.
These people used to roll out on the stage. It was a moving stage. You could smell the powder coming off of there. They were all powdered, and it's unbelievable. And all of a sudden, you're thinking, if this drummer had a heart attack and fell off of the stage, I could save this entire show. Anyway, that was my introduction to the stage. And I tell people, it's almost like when I was a kid, I was born in a trunk. And people say, were your parents in show business? No, they were in luggage. But that just happens to be the way it is. It just happened to be that my dad would take me every Saturday, and I had to be there. Yeah. And it was fantastic. I saw every band, every dancer, every major singer, including Frank Sinatra. all these people that I had no idea, one of these days I'd be working with them, actually working with a Frank Sinatra, Nancy Sinatra, et cetera, et cetera. And so I was very lucky. It was the 1950s when I came home from Korea as a Korean veteran, and I took my GI Bill and I studied music in Chicago with Roy Knapp at the Percussion Institute, whatever it was. And that was my beginnings, my real beginnings, because I worked all day. I was in school from 8 until 4 in the afternoon. At 8 at night until 4 in the morning, I was working a strip joint. It's called the Post Time Club on North Clark in Chicago. And I worked for one of those unbelievable, we used to call them the outfit. They were the D's, Dems, and those guys, if you know what I mean. And they were so sweet to me. They were very good to me. They were very happy that I was not into drugs, because they had had some problems with musicians. Now I talk about musicians and this band I was playing with. Drums, piano, and trumpet. That was our band.
Interesting combination, yeah.
What a band. And you know, we're playing for 10, 12, 14 girls a night, and they've all have music. Now I'm studying all day. This is such great basic training. I'm reading all these parts.
So charts were given to you from each girl, had different charts, and you're sight reading
Every
this stuff.
girl, almost every girl they had music for 18-piece bands.
Yeah.
For the big theaters where they stripped.
Yeah, yeah.
And in those days, it was not stripping to nudity. It was very high class. Everything was covered.
Almost like dance. It was more like a dance show to a certain
Sort
degree,
of,
right?
yeah. And you know, and all these gals, I mean, they were married, they had children, or they were youngsters and they were about to get married and have children, etc. It was not at all a dirty connotation or anything like that, pornographic in any way. But all of these girls used to come to me. I mean, practically every one of them would come and say to me, you know, for a young guy, you really seem to play my music beautifully. And you make it just feels so right. And I realized that I was an accompanist. I'm never going to be a star. I never even think about being a star. There's only one Buddy Rich, and we all know that. And Buddy Rich hired me to do his daughter's album. When Kathy did her album, and the guys in the band that knew Buddy said, how come you didn't play on your kid's album? One of my greatest compliments. Buddy Rich said, I wanted the best. What a thing for Buddy Rich, and you'd have to know Buddy Rich. You'd have to understand.
Yeah, he was
now maybe it was amazing. Our Jewish connection. I don't know. Anyway, that's how I kind of just dropped in.
That accompanying skill you learned.
No, but the thing was Shelley Mann, Alf Stoller. There were so many great drummers. They refused to play rock and roll. That was just filthy, dirty, nasty
and this was
music.
the shift over from where jazz was at, entering this rock scene,
Exactly.
50s and 60s, yeah.
I had just come off of the Count Basie band. How could you be better than swinging with the Count Basie band? When I hear some of that stuff on the radio today, it drives me nuts. It's so good. But all of a sudden, I'm getting calls from Bones Howe, great engineer, producer, Fifth Dimension. And we're doing all these records of the year. I just received my 8th Grammy-winning record of the year. Unfortunately, the sad part about it is that it's the Glenn Campbell song that he wrote with Julian Raymond. And it was a great song. I'm Not Gonna Miss You, I think it's called.
That's from the documentary that was aired.
You know, I had a whole day of interviews for Warner Brothers. All these cameras. I mean, you wouldn't believe what I was sitting through. Some of my calls, like my first call with Elvis, they said, we can't use him, he's an actor. We have to have actual musicians. And I tried to explain that I am a musician and I play the drums, and acting was kind of a sideline that carried me through whatever. And they said, we can't use you. But of course, I had been working with a young man by the name of Tommy Sands.
Oh, great.
Tommy Sands had a great manager by the name of Colonel Tom Parker. And it just took Tom Parker to call and say, no, we want Hal Blaine. And of course,
It was done.
I'm with Elvis.
It was done, yeah.
But most of these people had no idea that any of us could read music. Our little group, there was only 6 or 7 of us with Tommy Tedesco,
Yeah.
with Leon Russell, who unfortunately just passed away,
Yeah.
Don Randy on piano, Barney Kessel was on guitar.
Yeah.
We had, you know, the stuff that we were doing for Phil Spector, may he last through his lifetime sentence, unfortunately, and I think everyone involved knows that it was an accident. He didn't go get a gun and blow up, shoot a girl, kill a girl. It was an accident. But that was part of his MO. He was a very short guy. He suffered with that
small man concept.
what they call that syndrome. That a lot of little people have to look bigger.
The Napoleonic thing.
He had to have the biggest limo. He had to buy the biggest house he could find, a castle.
Right.
He had 30-something rooms. Well, I had 30-something rooms, but I didn't have a gun in every room. But Phil did. Anyway, to this day, I believe it was an accident, but it was part of his MO. And he just kept insisting that he was too wealthy to ever be convicted of this crime. And he was going through lawyers. You wouldn't believe how he was going through lawyers, paying him $1 million, and 20 minutes later, the check bounced because he refused them as a lawyer. So that's a whole nother story and a whole nother chapter.
It's a history that you're connected to. That this is what really amazes me, and the sessions really is about that next generation being able to understand, like all the names that you mentioned. They've got to research this, because this really is about the core of the music industry in its changeover from that jazz big band into the shift of this new age performance.
New poets who were writing music. Paul Simon. Burt Bacharach. All these people who just came out of nowhere. Nobody knew who they were, but they were guys out of the Brill Building, etc., including Phil Spector. And it was something new for everybody. And I try to tell people, comedy is my life. I really love comedy. I always have. I worked with every comedian in the world. Was friends with so many of them I could do their routines backwards. They used to say, Hal, get a seat down here around ringside. Buddy Hackett and Don Rickles and George Burns. I mean, I worked from the youngest to the oldest. And it just stuck. And I love comedy. So when these kids would come, I would do a clinic for kids at schools or college, whatever. And I used to tell them, you know, the most important question. Kids would ask me, what's the hardest part about being a studio musician? And I'd tell them, finding a parking space. It's almost impossible, especially in Hollywood. All of the major studios were in Hollywood, and they didn't all have parking lots. Some of the parking lots were little narrow alleys where you had to park behind 15 cars and hope you could get out when it was time to get out. So those are comedy helped me through a lot. Working with the Mamas and the Papas. I did all their records. I mean, they were like skyrockets. Giant stars. Exactly. And of course, they lived by the hot spoon and whatever they lived by. Had nothing to do with me. I never got involved with any of that kind of stuff. I never wanted to. I didn't like it. I didn't like the smell of it, or the taste of it.
But you kept yourself in line.
I hated booze.
But you kept yourself in line as a real top-notch professional. That you set a standard that still to this day, Hal, your standard is maintained and people are trying to achieve it.
Well, I tell people all the time, rock and roll, which everybody refers to as R&R, rock and roll, what I tell them is R&R stands for responsibility and reliability.
Nice.
Get there on time, and a lot of musicians are watching this. Show some interest in that song that you're recording.
Yeah.
When they call a 5-10 minute break, don't just run to call your service to see where you're working the next 2 hours or whatever. Don't just run out and grab a Coke or a coffee or a cigarette or whatever. Listen to the song you just played.
Yeah.
Listen, see if you made a mistake.
Yeah.
Don't let them find it 4 days later when they're mixing. This is long before Pro Tools and all that simple stuff.
Yeah.
And so show interest. The guy that's sitting there with the big smile who wrote the song, pat him on the back, say, what a nice song, I love the song, you know. No one had ever heard these songs. These are all brand new songs.
Absolutely. And they all became hits.
Oh,
That's
God.
incredible.
And plus, we had such respect for Paul Simon. Two of my biggest, I happen to play on, I was lucky enough to play on Bridge Over Troubled Water,
Powerful.
gigantic,
Powerful.
Mrs. Robinson,
Powerful.
Here's to You. All those kind of things. I did so many wonderful hits with Paul and Artie.
Yeah. Incredible. You know, Denny Tedesco, when he put the documentary together of the Wrecking Crew, I'm on an airline in Delta flying, and I pop into the screen, and the Wrecking Crew is being played there, so it's amazing. Just talk about the Wrecking Crew. When you guys came in, you came up with that name. You know, you guys came in as a younger generation to the suits that were already, guys who dressed in suits that were playing violins and stuff. What happened at that time? How was that feeling of that show?
I'll tell you exactly how that happened. Rock and roll became the thing all of a sudden. It infiltrated movies, television, pilots, everything that was being done became rock and roll.
Right.
So many of the great drummers, there's some great stories. Shelly Manne was the guy. I mean, we all loved Shelly.
I took lessons with him.
Terrific guy.
Yeah.
And Shelly, I remember Shelly had opened a nightclub in Hollywood. It was called Shelly's Manhole.
The Manhole, right?
It was a jazz club. And Shelly was a terrific guy, very straight, and he was great. And I was lucky enough to have done my very first record of the year, the Grammy-winning record of the year, was A Taste of Honey with the Tijuana Brass.
Herb Alpert, the Tijuana Brass.
And I was doing all the, we were doing all the TV, et cetera, before they went on the road and hired their road people. And so I'm walking down the street, and Shelly knew who I was. I had talked to him a number of times as a fan. My drumsticks were Shelly Manne drumsticks that I used. And I see Shelly, and he waves to me, and he said, "Hey, Hal, I love that record that you did with Herb. It's a beautiful record." I said, "Well, you're not going to be very happy if what I'm going to tell you." And he said, "What?" He said, "What?" I said, "Well, you've got this great jazz club. Herb Alpert really is a jazz player," and he was. But I said, "Herb is opening another club down the street here." He said, "Oh, no." He had just opened Shelly's Manhole. He said, "Oh, no, what's the name of the club?" I said, "He's calling it the Tijuana Brass Hole." So it was one of those hysterical things. We just laughed all over Hollywood about it. Shelly was, I would consider, a great friend.
A beautiful guy.
You know, whenever I went to the drum shop, there were certain guys that hated me. They said, that loud junk, it's garbage, it's horrible. But within weeks, these guys are calling me, "Hey, listen, can I come by and listen to you on a session?" Everybody became friends again. They had no idea, and the Wrecking Crew is the perfect example. We had a call. I had personally been working for Walt Disney because I was with Tommy Sands, had gotten my feet wet with rock and roll. They wanted our little band, a little rock and roll band. It was before we were called the Wrecking Crew. And we went into the Disney studios, and just to set the picture of Walt Disney and his studios, I mean, there was not a blade of grass that wasn't perfect.
Immaculate.
You never saw a cigarette butt laying somewhere because it was, everybody smoked in those days. Anyway, we go in, and we sit down. It was a 12 o'clock call. So 11:45, we're all sitting in our seats. They had just, Mr. Bruner, Bob Bruner, I think his name was, composer.
Yeah.
He had dismissed about a 70-piece orchestra. There were all these classically trained studio musicians.
Dressed in suits.
Gorgeous.
Right?
And they had beautiful suits. Yeah. And I used to call them the Blue Blazers because they all had either suits or a blue blazer, neckties. Some of them carried their own ashtrays. They never spoke when they're sitting there. Yeah. There was a contractor there that was always looking to fire anybody he could. Yeah. They were really the Adolf Hitlers of the music business. Yeah, yeah. And so this fellow, Bob Bruner, said, "We brought you fellas here together." There were about 6 of us. Myself was probably Leon Russell. Ray Pullman was the great Fender player that played all our bass stuff. Right. And he was a great arranger. Tommy Tedesco, of course, was on guitar. Lyle Ritz was on upright bass. And so Mr. Bruner started talking to us. He said, "Fellas, we brought you together here. We've released the band. We're doing the soundtrack to a movie. And it's a movie about an automobile. The movie it's called, as I recall, it was Herbie the Car." Absolutely right. And there's a scene where there's a bunch of monkeys that get out. Somehow they get loose and they run all over this town. And we're going to have you play this piece of music just for it's almost like the Warner Brothers days of da 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 da. It was that kind of thing. And it was probably 115, 20 bars of music at a pretty good clip. And he said, "And don't let it frighten you, because we've got 2 hours to memorize what we're going to do," because he didn't know anybody read music. Glenn Campbell was there. He was the only guy that did not read music.
Yeah. But Glenn had great ears.
Oh, the best. Yeah. And so he said, and the other thing is that we're in the movie business, and he didn't know we've been doing movies and television and on and on and on. I just got my 4th Academy Award movie with Glenn, as a matter of fact. Wow. Anyhow, so he said, we're gonna do something. Don't let it frighten you. It's called a click track. And you're going to hear a click, 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 and you'll hear that. It's just something to keep you from the beginning of the movie, from the beginning of the score to the end of the score, with stops in between. Okay. We're saying, "Oh, yes, sir. Oh, of course, sir. Oh, yes." And so all of a sudden, he tells this lady, "Shirley, put the click on a very slow click so the guys can memorize it and get used to it." She said, "Okay, we will." And so he said, "We've got 2 hours. The guys are at lunch. We'll take our time and we'll have a good time doing this." So he said, "Shirley, please play the click track for the guys to hear." Well, the minute we hear 5, 6, 7, 8, boom, we're playing.
You're in.
And it was the proper tempo. And we did this entire piece of music. It was probably 2 minutes, maybe a little more. And when he finished, he said, "That was perfect. How did you guys do that?" And Tommy Tedesco, God bless him, and
funny guy.
And Denny's Denny's mother just passed away.
Beautiful woman, yeah.
Carmi was a wonderful, wonderful lady. Yeah. And I can tell you a story about that. Anyway, Tommy Tedesco stands up with his big belly and his comedic ways, almost like a little kid.
Funny guy.
And when Bob Bruner said, "How did you guys do that?" Tommy stood up like a little kid and he said, "We practice a lot during the day, sir." And that became one of the great phrases of all studio musicians. We had so many times we played, because producers came from every city in Europe, South America, Mexico, Latin America, everything. We were doing everybody's records all over the world. Yeah. My discography count is just approaching 6,000.
That's incredible.
That's just phonograph records that we called phono records.
Yeah.
That's not movies, television, pilots,
Right.
commercials.
Right.
God, hundreds and hundreds of commercials. You could see how busy we were.
Yeah.
But meanwhile, these guys, the Blue Blazers,
Right.
some of them were hanging around that particular day. And I overheard them, and they're saying, these kids are going to wreck the business. You know, this was a crazy thing that we just played, and they heard us do what we do, and they said, these kids are going to wreck the business. Well, I had personally hired the lady that owned the Musicians Answering Service. Her name was Arlen, A-R-L-Y-N.
Interesting.
And I said, Arlen, I'm going to start calling the guys the wrecking crew because everybody says we're going to wreck the business. So when I would call her, she was a gal that took everybody's calls. You want Mr. Blaine for what day? She had all of our work
All the
booked.
schedules, yeah.
Okay, we were booked months, 3 months in advance sometimes with some of these people. She'd never say I was on the road if I did go out with somebody, which was rare.
Yeah.
She would always say he's not available until so-and-so.
Right.
Then they would say, okay, let's book him then. And we have to have his band. I think you call the wrecking crew. And it just took
stuck.
over like
It just stuck.
wildfire.
It just
All of a
stuck.
sudden, we were the wrecking crew. And it wasn't a nasty connotation.
Yeah.
We weren't wrecking anything.
Yeah.
We were bringing home gold records. All that stuff with the Tijuana Brass that started it all.
Yeah.
Paul Simon came along, took us to New York. We did a bunch of stuff there. Paul and Artie came to Hollywood. We did a bunch of stuff with them in Hollywood, which all became
Yeah.
records of the year.
Yeah.
And so all these things piled onto one another. And you know, it's the old Hollywood saying, you're only as good as your last hit.
Yeah.
Well, all of a sudden, people wanted the wrecking crew.
Right.
All they knew was people were saying, who are the kids playing that new genre
Right.
called rock and roll? And they come to find out we were all reliable, responsible people.
Right.
We were there on time.
First of all, the Wrecking Crew didn't wreck anything. What they did was create a foundation for the new music that is continuing today well into the 21st century. That's the first thing you did. But you as a drummer always, like even with the stories that you tell, how you played, the size of the drum set that you used, the sounds you were looking for. You were really inquisitive to research and find and do things and play in a way that always was about the song you were playing. You used the drum kit that was needed, the tools that were needed for that song. You customized every single song you played brilliantly with the groove, the feel, the sound.
Of course. Beach Boys, perfect example.
Absolutely. Perfect example, Beach Boys, in what you did.
We never did a take that I wasn't asked to come into the booth and listen to the take.
Yeah,
If it felt right, perfect, we got it.
yeah. That's
was it.
unbelievable. A couple quick things. First, Nancy Sinatra, you know, when you went out with her, what you were being paid with Nancy as opposed to what Irv was being paid with
Frank,
Old Blue Eyes, you know. It's an incredible story to see what you had developed and how you created a demand for what you did and what
Well, that's one of the great, for me, it's one of my life stories, is every time I'd go into the drum shop, I was a new kid on the block.
Yeah.
I had a charge account there. And I would go into the drum shop. In fact, I just saw those people, Stan and some of those people were here at the NAMM show.
Yeah.
And this fellow Stan would say to me, this guy with Frank Sinatra, Irv Kotler, I think his name, Irv Kotler. Did you have a beef with him or something? I said, I don't know the man, never met the man, he said, well, every time he comes in here, if he sees your picture on the wall, he starts really, he gets very upset about you. He hates your music. He hates what you're doing. You're not a musician. You're playing some garbage. And I say, I don't know the man.
I met Irv and I heard these stories from him, yes.
Well, anyway, so all of a sudden, you know, here I am, the busy guy. I get a call, and the composer, great composer, recently passed away. He said, Hal, I've got an idea. I want to put you in the middle of the studio, and I'm going to have 2 brass bands on either side of you, big brass orchestras. And we're going to do this movie. Now this fellow had me at my drums, and behind me, in a percussion section, was Irv Cutler, Emil Richards,
beautiful.
Larry Bunker.
Yeah.
There was all these great guys.
Best of the best.
But they had Irv Cutler, and I had never met him. I didn't even meet him then. He was playing tambourine for this whole movie. We worked about a week, whatever it was. It was fantastic. It was fantastic. And Irv Cutler, God bless him, he came to me at the end of this thing and he said, "Hal, I owe you a big apology." Yeah. I said, "Don't even worry about it." So I said something to him in Yiddish. And that identified me as a fellow Jew.
Yeah.
That probably helped some too.
Yeah.
Anyway, and we became friends.
Yeah.
And before you know it, we were on the road together because he was with Frank at night and I was with Nancy.
That's right.
Doing the dinner show.
Yeah.
That's what that was all about.
Right.
We were both on the road. But here was my name at Caesar's Palace on the marquee.
On the marquee, man, absolutely.
I couldn't believe it.
It really did change the industry because what you did was you opened up a whole nother level of the drummer being featured in certain areas. Sure. Let me drop a couple more quick names before we close up. Elvis. I mean, the whole Elvis, magical, aura that he had. You were right in the thick of it.
What a strange name for a guy, Elvis. Elvis Presley, when he was in the service, and the story was Elvis was signed to do a movie, but he was in Germany, and he couldn't get out of the contract. So Colonel Parker, who happened to have been also the manager of Tommy Sands was a young, gorgeous kid. He was one of the very first rock and roll legends.
Yeah.
He suggested Tommy for this movie called Sing Boy Sing.
Yeah.
Tommy auditioned, got the movie, was a major big hit. Tommy became a star. One night, Nancy Sinatra came to meet us backstage at the Coconut Grove in Hollywood. This is the old Hollywood. And they fell in love, plain and simple.
Yeah.
And within 6 months, they got married.
Yeah, he was a good-looking guy.
He was gorgeous.
Yeah,
he looked just like a young Frank Sinatra on stage, tuxedo.
Yeah.
And 10 minutes later, they were divorced. It was a Hollywood marriage, unfortunately.
Yeah.
10 minutes, you're lucky. If you get 15 minutes, you're really lucky. So unfortunately, that happened. But during that time, I was lucky enough to become a part of that family. Because Nancy, we were always in Palm Springs, partying.
Yeah.
We were in Frank's house. Frank was always on the road.
Yeah.
Frank had his own airplane. My drum tech, Ricky, used to meet his airplane and get his equipment off and bring it down to the house where we all were.
Yeah.
That's how I happened to move to the desert area. I love the area.
Yeah, beautiful.
So anyway, one thing led to another. I had married, unfortunately, a woman who had the name of Barbara, who I later called Barbara the Barbarian. It was a big joke, industry joke. Frank Sinatra just married a Barbara.
Yeah, Barbara Marx. Yeah.
She was Barbara Sinatra,
Yeah.
Barbara Marx.
Yeah.
And we were on the road together. So you can imagine the jokes that were flying between Frank and me and the two Barbaras, and my Barbara never said 3 words. She was just a gorgeous, big blonde who was beautiful.
Yeah.
Barbara Marx was just, an elderly, pretty lady, and she used to hostess Frank Sinatra's parties.
Right.
And that's how they met.
Yeah.
So that was a funny thing. There's a whole lot of more to that story that we could never talk about.
But it's amazing the connections that you, every single story.
It's unbelievable.
It really
to
is.
me.
Now. It's every single story has to do with legends and people that were a part of changing the music industry, and the momentum of. If I said in closing, if we had to leave a message to the next generation that really allowed them to watch this here, and as they see and hear you speak about the names that you're mentioning, they have to go research all these names.
Sure.
Sinatra and and all these, Tommy Sands, all these people. So they'll do their work for sure as they're watching this here. What would you say to them for where music is going and what they need to prepare to become successful in their musical passion?
Well, there's an old saying that used to go around, I don't want to learn how to read music because it'll hurt my soul. That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
My analogy is driving an automobile.
Yeah.
You study. The first time you drive, it's like you're watching and you're looking for this and be careful of this and that. And within a couple of weeks, it's second nature. You're waving at people, you're turning on the radio, you're moving, you're driving a car.
Right.
Playing music for audiences, for recordings, and let's face it, the recording industry is the working in studios. The studio musician is just about the highest ring you can get.
Yeah.
I wouldn't even take movies because they just didn't pay the kind of money that recordings paid.
Yeah.
And so what I tell people today, when I see kids today, I have a simple thing, and as I asked you before, and you had the answer immediately. I said, what is a song? A song is a story. Well, if you're up there showing off on your drums or your saxophone or anything else, people are not hearing the words to this story.
Absolutely.
They don't know the story. Yeah. So I never recorded a song before I listened to the song. I want to know what's my motivation. Right. And part of that comes from being an actor. Yeah. I was working with all these great star actors, and it was always, what is my motivation? Because sometimes they started a scene 6 months later.
Yeah.
And they wanted to know what their motivation was. And that's why you have directors, you have assistant directors that prompt you, etc., and prompters. So I tell kids there are a couple of things you got to know about music. Drugs are a dead end. Yeah. If you're going to fool around with drugs, you might become the biggest star in the world, but you're going to die. Yeah. We're all going to die anyway. Yeah. Unfortunately, we're going to pass away.
We just don't want to speed it up.
Well, especially playing music. Yeah. I have tried to ask friends that I know, when it comes to drummers, I just did a big photo shoot with Alex Solka. He's one of the great photographers, a terrific kid. Yeah. And I've asked him the same thing. Why does every drummer have to look like, why do you have to look like an idiot? Yeah. Why can't you just be a gentleman playing your drums and doing what you're doing, not and this and that? They don't have to do that.
Yeah. Point well taken.
Be a gentleman.
Point well taken.
Take care of the song. Yeah. Listen to the song, enjoy the song, and show a lot of interest.
Nice. Because
I used to have a saying, if you smile, you stay around a while. If you pout, you out. And believe me, I can't tell you how many times it's happened that a guy walked in and looked at the music and said, same old crap all the time. And I say, hey, you're probably not going to be with us anymore because all those microphones are on.
Everything's live.
The producers just heard you say that.
Yeah.
And they're going to come to me as the contractor or leader or whatever, and they're going to say, I don't want that guy in my session. Yeah. And I used to go to these guys, I won't mention their names, they're very famous guys, and they'd say, do you like your new home? Do you like your beautiful golf set clubs that you bought?
Yeah.
Do you like the clothing? Does your wife enjoy this? They'd say, I got it. I say, show a little interest, that's all. Yeah. Just if you smile, you stay around a while.
Absolutely, man. That's profound advice. How you really are a national and international treasure. Whether you want to, and you're very humble, whether you want to realize that or not, what you have given to the industry is more than just performing your talent. You shaped the industry. You shaped the industry from that seat at that drum set, not only with performances and all the songs that you played, but with just the business skills that you had to network and move things around and create things. Your wide ability of talent as a player, as a producer, as an actor, that's you have had blessings beyond this is 10 lifetimes.
More. Jesus.
It really is amazing. So on behalf of the sessions, we thank you so much for all that you continue to do, what you have done and what you've guided. Even someone like myself on Long Island, hearing the songs in the early 60s and just saying, wow, this was so inspiring, and being guided by your playing, analyzing and studying your playing, and developing a little career of my own that I said, well, I always think back that, Hal was there with me, guiding me along the way. So you've done that to millions of people. That is powerful. On behalf of the sessions, we thank you so much for
My
your
pleasure.
wisdom, your kindness, your compassion, your passion, and everything you have done for all of us.
Listen, all you
Thanks.
drummers out there, keep your head on straight and play a straight line. I mean, do not take seriously some of the maniacal things that you're witnessing in some of these groups.
Yeah.
Because those kids are here for maybe 4, 5, 6 hit records,
Yeah.
and it's all over.
Yeah.
So if you smile, stay around a while.
Thank you so much. On behalf of the sessions, Hal,
my
you are the
pleasure.
best. What a gentleman. Thanks.